NXT, NXT, NXT,
NXT.
NXT.
This right here, this is
NXT.
All they hear is a pounding in their chest. That's not a heartbeat. It's opportunity knocking. The roar of the crowd. Stop your feet to the ground. Give it all to me now. Cause it calls, only calls all the way to the sound of the screams getting loud. Give it all to me now. Cause it calls, only calls.
What is up, wrestling fans? It's me, it's STUBB. Why? Because I'm the man, the myth, the legend, the Mighty Minion himself, Stubby. And I am coming to you from Kayfabe Studios in Modesto, California for this first edition of Next Up. It is a segment that I'm going to do on a weekly basis that covers the happenings in NXT for the tapings that take place every Wednesday on the WWE Network. I am well aware that the intro to this show has the old NXT theme. I was not aware at the time that NXT was revamping everything, not just the titles, but it looks like they revamped the opening sequence along with the theme song.
what? What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
Yeah, I know. The new theme song is brought to you by the CFOs. The song is called Rage, and I guess it's supposed to be this whole Rage identity that NXT is trying to do. The NXT taping was on April 12th. Today's April the 13th, Thursday, so I'm a little behind by shooting this, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference, seeing that NXT is a week behind on their tapings. But to open the show, our announcer panel was Perry Watson, Tom Phillips, and Nigel McGuinness. And I have to say, this team works well together. There's not an overselling on anyone's part, and egos set aside, minus Tom there, obviously. But the show opened up with Aleister Black versus Corey Hollis. And I've never seen Corey Hollis before, so I'm assuming he's a jobber, which right off the bat lets you know that the name Aleister Black is going to get the win. It's a squash match. But this is Aleister Black's debut on NXT programming at Full Sail. He made his appearance, or his debut, at NXT TakeOver, but he was a little unknown at the time. And I have to say, WWE has done well with this character. Aleister Black has the look, he has the music, he has the gimmick, which we're going to be talking about on the Savvo and Stubby show tomorrow when it comes to gimmicks, and that's going to be the hot topic for the week. But going into it, you know that you got to put this guy over because he is new to the company, and typically in history, when you have a jobber in the ring like that, it's not going to be a quick match. But Aleister Black got right down to business. His approach in the ring was his hands behind his back, so you thought Corey Hollis was going to have an easy just shoot in to start the match off. Didn't take much, though. It was a single move finish. Aleister Black hit the Black Mass, landed flush on Corey's face, and that was it. And even at one point, you had the fans chanting, "Black is going to kill you." So, I mean, if I'm a jobber, and I know I'm getting paid for this, I'm just dropping. Just, pin me, get it over with. It was about a 10-second match. Nothing really special about it, but you get a feel for this guy already, that he's got potential for future big talent, which is pretty nice. Following that, we had an open segment to Ty Dillinger speaking to Kayla Braxton about his making his debut to SmackDown. At this point, he is 2-0. He holds a win over... see, this always happens. I can't think of the guy's name. Kurt Hawkins, and then he has a win over Simon Gotch's old partner. I can't believe I'm doing this again. I'll figure it out afterward, but the other half of the Vaudevillains, Aiden English, there it is. And, you know, people said that he was going to be a jobber coming in, kind of like the way that Dolph Ziggler holds his own now with WWE. But you can't expect too much out of Ty Dillinger. He's getting over with the crowd simply with the 10 gimmick. But the guy has heart. 15 years in the business, and he's slowly making his way up to the ranks. But he's obviously not there because with the interview with Kayla, which I had to say was a very good, clean, crisp presentation by Ty Dillinger, he noted that he was unfinished business there at NXT and says he has a match against Eric Young next week at NXT at Full Sail University, which will not allow interference because it will be a steel cage match, which is pretty neat because that's not something that's commonplace for NXT to do a steel cage match. This allows Ty Dillinger to get that extra push with that believability that he can go the distance with a good name. Eric Young is no one to sneeze at. He's been in the wrestling business for a long time, very revered over in Impact Wrestling. But WWE is slow sometimes when it comes to recognizing talent that's not something that they produced. I'm personally glad that Ty Dillinger made the transition. I think the kid has a lot of potential, and I say kid because he's younger than me. But he is going to be one of those baby faces, kind of the way that Sami Zayn was, and I don't know if he'll get lost in the shuffle because of that. But overall, the presentation, the interview, and his confidence, it was all there, and I'm looking forward to seeing him more in SmackDown. Right after the interview, the screen cut to a graphic that was stating that it would be Drew McIntyre versus Oney Lorcan as the main event for NXT. I was, at this point, really excited to see Drew McIntyre, a.k.a. Drew Galloway, coming over from Impact Wrestling. He has a 1-year contract inked with WWE. Whether this is a 1-year contract with NXT TakeOver for developmental, or if this is a 1-year contract total. I know there's talks that WWE is doing a UK thing and potentially bringing him in over there, or he may just get that push within the year to take on Bobby Roode or Hideo Itami. But Drew McIntyre, if done correctly this time around, has a lot of potential. I think Vince now sees that he made the mistake of sticking him with three-man band initially, and that Drew, if packaged correctly, can carry his own weight. And Oney Lorcan, although he's kind of bland, he comes off like a Daniel Bryan style, but with a Cesaro, a mini Cesaro complex. But we'll get to the match later on in this presentation. Shortly after that, we cut to another vignette that was setting up a farewell to Shinsuke Nakamura. The only problem I had with this is Shinsuke Nakamura didn't go away. He didn't pass away. He didn't leave the company. He got promoted. And to be honest with you, he should have been promoted right off the bat. The guy's a big star over in Japan. He was working the main events there, and he's no stranger to the independent scene. And to have him take a step down, and I understand he has to cut his promos and learn the language and learn the styles here in the United States. Bringing him to NXT for a year was kind of like a demotion. And to see him now move to SmackDown is supposed to be the promotion, but he's still just a notch below where he was at before. But I'm confident that he will make his name felt. I mean, so far he's appeared on SmackDown without having to really say anything or do anything other than his intro, and he's getting over with the fans. The next match up on the card, we had DIY versus Dylan Miley and Michael Blaze. DIY was Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. Dylan Miley and Michael Blaze, I don't know if these were local boys or if they are also in developmental, but Dylan Miley, with a name like that, you wouldn't expect to get what you saw. This guy was a beast. He was like a roided out version of Tommaso Ciampa, who I have to state looks a lot like Modest Yahoo, the singer. But Dylan Miley, Michael Blaze, they look like they were just a tag team that was put together last minute in the back room. And Miley looks like he had a knee brace on. I don't know if it's an existing injury or not existing. Sorry, I don't know if it was an injury that's like current problematic or if it was just to make sure that he was going to be all right through the whole match. Monster of a man, though. I'm kind of confused by the setup of the tag team. You got 3 guys in the ring that look like cruiserweights, and then you've got this guy who obviously is a heavyweight. I don't know if it was to make him look even bigger, but that guy's legs were the size of Tommaso and Johnny together. And Blaze was kind of bland, but I think that was kind of the setup, so that way our focus was on Miley. Pure power, though. Of course, DIY put out a quality match. They never failed to do so. But it was really Miley on his own on that side of the tag team. DIY comes off with the victory. But after the match was over, DIY left the ring, and the delete chant started from the fans with that Hardy reference. And Miley decided to turn on his partner and just beat the living shit out of him. He was literally picking the guy up by his skull and slamming him onto his face, which I didn't think was possible. Apparently the guy has a little skull. Wasn't too impressed with this, but the fact that, you got someone that big, you want to showcase his power. And they did a decent job of doing so. Following this, we had a Ember Moon spot, a vignette set up from her takeover match with Asuka. I don't really understand the point of this vignette. It came off making Ember Moon look like she was weak. Understandably so, she was upset the fact that she lost in the fashion that she lost to Asuka at TakeOver with the interference. And they put some real thought into this because this was Ember Moon walking through the arena after the crew was taking down the ring and everything, and she was showing her disdain for the fact that she lost the match. But I don't think she quite knows what her character is yet, and I don't know what her character is yet, but she has so much potential. When I've seen some of her match highlights on YouTube, as Athena, this girl's amazing. She has so much potential, and the developmental team can't quite figure out what to do with her. But this obviously leads up for a rematch build-up, which I believe will be happening in May at the next TakeOver. Whether or not this will be a triple threat match or not is to be seen, because the NXT is really stepping up the women's division, which leads me into my next transition. There was a graphic that popped up that Ruby Riott will be in action. But at the time they do this, no opponent was initially announced. And the problem that I have with this is that when you don't announce whose talent is, or who they're going to be wrestling against, you really sell short who the opponent really is going to be and make it assume that it's going to be a squash match. A good example of this would be on Monday Night Raw when you had Finn Balor in action, and that's what WWE put on the marquee, but never announced that it was going to be Jinder Mahal. So you assume right off the bat Jinder Mahal is going to get squashed in this match, and that was the case after some botched moves. But the whole art of selling seems to be gone, and I don't get it. But Ruby Riott, who is fairly new to NXT, I believe she was part of Shimmer, which Original Joe mentioned on a couple episodes back of the Savvo and Stubby show. There's a lot of talent that looks like it comes from Shimmer, and I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot more coming over when the women's tournament starts up. But Ruby Riott looks a lot like Beaker from the Muppets. If you are familiar with that, you'll laugh the next time you see her. She's got this goth grunge look to her, but very much has that special look to her. Then they cut to a NXT book spot where they are getting a book published about the developmental of NXT. Over 200 pages, yada yada yada. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not going to try to sell it to you. But it was a good place for advertisement. Back to Ruby Riott. Her match was coming up next. She looks like Paige 2.0, but not as attractive. I like the look, though. I like the style of her character. There's not much more I can say about it. Her opponent for the night, when it was finally announced, was Kimberly Franklin. Franklin is known as Kimber Lee over in Shimmer. I'm really digging this character also. This is one of those rare opportunities where I was actually excited to see the women's match, and NXT has done that for me lately, where on Raw and SmackDown I don't have that want or that desire, because it's usually a 50-50 booking. So you'll have one week where Mickie James will beat Alexa Bliss, and then the following week it'll be Alexa Bliss beating Mickie James. So there is no belief that wins and loss matters. But in NXT, you're really trying to get a character build. They dropped the ball on this one by not mentioning Kimberly fighting Ruby Riott in the very beginning when they showed the graphic. But I was still convinced that Kimberly had a chance to win this. During this time, they did announce that they're going to have a 32-woman tournament that's coming to the network. During the match, it was a pretty physical match, a lot of deep slaps. I mean, this was some serious slapping. Nikki Cross appears in the audience as a distraction for Ruby Riott, but it didn't seem to work. NXT's crazy people seem to be a lot more believable than SmackDown or Raw's crazy people. When it comes to sanity and when it comes to Nikki Cross, I really think that there's a lot of screws loose there. And you gotta credit creative for that. Good psychology to this match. There's a lot of feeding off one another. But Ruby Riott ends up getting the win with her Pele kick, which was a pretty vicious kick. And like I said, I'm really excited, looking forward to seeing the women's division start up, because I think that you have enough talent on all three rosters to actually build its own show. I've talked about it on the Savvo and Stubby show before. I think it would be great to see a show dedicated to just women's wrestling. And then, I mean, they can still showcase their talents and their abilities at the carded pay-per-views for both Raw and SmackDown's brands. But you get better product out there instead of trying to mash everything in and trying to condense as much product as you possibly can into one show. Shortly after this, ESPN did a spot on Drew McIntyre, which leads us into the main event. The news on McIntyre was his deal was not finalized with WWE and NXT until the day of TakeOver. So it was kind of like a not for sure thing until the day of. And it's good to see that he went here instead of going over to the indie scene. Camera cuts to a feud spot between Peyton Royce and Billie Kay against Aaliyah and Liv Morgan. Aaliyah and Liv Morgan are back in the medical training area, getting taped up and whatnot. Aaliyah is being looked at by the trainer, and Liv Morgan's got her hipster or old lady glasses on, looking very, very laxed. And Peyton Royce and Billie Kay are coming back there as if they are shooting a Snapchat or a voyeur-style camera video walking through the back. At this point, Billie Kay gets dunked into a therapy tub and freaks out. Not really sure the point of the whole angle. I'm thinking, or I'm guessing, that's their way of building up a feud. But, I mean, they could have done without this. And so finally we get to our main event. We got Oney Lorcan versus Drew McIntyre. Oney's got that very, very plain gimmick, but it works for him. There's a believability to his character. I can get behind this guy, but I'm not sure if all fans feel that way. I think the diehard fans just want to see wrestling. They don't need the whole gimmick thing, but you got the kids and you got the moms and dads that are kind of your casual fan that don't understand it and need the bells and whistles. But I think if he can get over with enough people, he'll be getting to the main roster pretty soon. Shortly after this, Drew McIntyre comes out. The guy has been repackaged. This being his second run, they went with the Scottish approach. They kept the graphic and everything simple, but they used like a very Celtic. I don't know if Celtic is Irish. I think it's Irish. Very that area. I don't own a map. But I dig it. The guy looks a lot bigger this time around. He grew the facial hair out. And I'm convinced by his presence. He looks like he was towering over Lorcan, but Lorcan also was on 205 Live not but 2 weeks ago. So, guy is considered a cruiserweight, very small build, but a lot of power. Like I said, he's like a miniature version of Cesaro. Match started out simple, but Oney hit some nasty running European uppercuts, which sent McIntyre to the outside, which then left Oney to take to the turnbuckle and try to do a crossbody to the outside, but McIntyre caught him, did a tilt-a-whirl slam, and dropped him on the apron, which that looked like it had to hurt. They took everything back into the ring. Lorcan got sent to the ropes, and Drew McIntyre set up a reverse Alabama Slammer, but shortly after picking him back up, he hit an elbow to Lorcan, and we saw some color, and that's not something that you normally see on WWE programming these days, being the PG era, but I'm guessing one of these reckless elbows that Drew threw caught him right on the scalp and busted him open. After the match was over, he met up with Kayla Braxton on the ramp, and she asked him directly, why did he choose to come back to NXT? And in an indirect way, he gave spots out to both Raw and SmackDown, stating that he has the Raw talent, and he's ready to lay the SmackDown, but NXT is where he wants to be. And as I stated before, he has a 1-year deal set up with NXT. But there are talks behind the scenes that he is already a setup build with Bobby Roode for the NXT Championship. But there were talks that Roode will be feuding with Hideo Itami first. And it was noted at the end of the show when Shinsuke Nakamura came out to give his farewell speech that Hideo Itami was there on the ramp. So any sayings or beliefs that Hideo Itami is nowhere in the picture is false. And also to point out a false statement, there was notations that Crazy Mary Dobson is no longer with NXT, but if you go back and watch NXT TakeOver this past Wednesday, she in fact was on the ramp. Whether or not she's quit since then, she was at least under contract as of last week. I hope that she is an acquisition that stays with NXT because she has a lot to offer. Like I said, Joe mentioned on our previous show that a lot of this talent's coming from Shimmer, and after looking at the roster and previous roster from Shimmer, there is a lot of hot talent that should be making their way over. I know currently you have Mia Yim, who is over in Impact as Jade. I don't know if she's any longer with the company, but she has had feuds with Athena on the independent scene, and it was a hell of a match. That content could be found on the Savvo and Stubby group page, or even the Savvo and Stubby Facebook page. But if they can get Jade to come over to NXT, there is a lot of potential. I don't want to downplay women's wrestling, but it'd be a lot of men caliber wrestling matches in the women's division. But with that said, this is just a NXT wrap up. Again, this is NXT Up. This is the program that you will get the latest information, a quick breakdown of NXT's happenings, along with any future news that I come across, can be found right here on Next Up. But until then, it's me. It's STUBB. Why? Because I'm the man, the myth, the legend, the Mighty Minion himself, Stubby. And this is Next Up. Be sure to check out the Savvo and Stubby Show. We can be found on Spreaker. That's SPREAKER.com. Or you can download the Spreaker app by going to Google or the Apple Store. Download the app, click on the Savvo and Stubby Show, and boom, we're in your pocket. Boom, we're in your ear. In the Savvo and Stubby Show link, you'll find both the Savvo and Stubby Show and Next Up. This being the first episode of Next Up. There will be more coming in the following weeks. But the Savvo and Stubby Show air every Friday, starring myself, the Greek Mystique, Savvo the Savior, and the original Joe, who is new to the Savvo and Stubby Show team. This will be his third episode, and we have a lot to talk about tomorrow about the happenings of the Superstar Shake-Up, or Shakedown, or half draft, whatever you want to call it at that point. But we will be touching base on that, along with the hot topic for the week, which has to do with the gimmick era, and if the gimmick era is dead in wrestling these days. So be sure to check us out. Again, that's the Savvo and Stubby Show. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Spreaker, and hopefully soon we'll be on iTunes. Until then, Stubby out.